Hi everyone, I'm Ursula, Collie at EMG Solicitors, and I've got with me Shannon of our employment team, who's recently joined us. We're very excited about this, and Graham's here today to talk about questions that are arising about furlough. This is something that's come up a lot with our employer clients recently. So Graham, just jumping straight in with my first question, can I ask you, can an employee ask to be put on furlough leave?
Short answer to that is yes, they can. The but is that the employer doesn't have to agree to putting them on furlough leave. There may be very good reasons why an employer wants an employee to remain in employment doing the job, so the discretion is very much on the part of the employer. The alternatives, layoff, redundancy, are what the government is wanting to avoid by this scheme. So yes, the ball is very much in the employer's court on that decision.
Okay, and so when you come to managing the furlough leave, suppose I'm an employer and I've got some staff off on furlough, can I move them around and swap staff in and out? Can I rotate them? Is that allowed under the rules?
You can, and there may be very good reasons that you want to do that in practice. If you're a large employer with a number of employees, particularly employees who are doing similar jobs, it would be fair, it would be the right thing to do in terms of participation to rotate them. Each employee has got to be furloughed for a minimum period of 3 weeks. But you could, for example, have an arrangement where you've got one employee who is furloughed for 3 weeks and then returns to work for 3 weeks while a colleague takes their place. And you could do that indefinitely.
So it's quite flexible so long as you follow this 3-week rule. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Looking at it the other way round then, could it be unfair if you had an employee who maybe was asked to carry on working and they didn't want to carry on working because they were struggling with childcare or other caring responsibilities? Are you seeing employers having some issues about these sort of questions?
Yes, anecdotally, I've heard from employers who have employees who are in work doing the jobs, watching colleagues on furlough leave, not working, soaking up the sun, particularly in the last few weeks, and that can cause some resentment. You've got two typical camps of employees. You'll have those who would prefer to be on furlough and doing nothing and taking 80% of their pay. On the other hand, you will have employers who want to work, they will want or perhaps need to take 100% of their pay. And there will be tensions, there'll be a friction between those two categories of people. The thing to do is to manage it fairly, to select people for furlough leave objectively, to invite volunteers for furlough in the first instance, but to be transparent with your employees and to document any changes in any agreement. That's going to be very important, and that you keep those records for 5 years. But provided that you do that, you should be okay.
Well, that sounds like good advice, especially about documenting what you're doing. So moving to a slightly different part of the furlough questions, what about holiday? People, are they still entitled to furlough while they're on holiday? Do they have to take holiday? So first question really is, does holiday continue to accrue during the furlough?
It does, in pretty much the same way that if you were an employee who was on sick, your holiday leave continues to accrue during the period that you're absent from work as a result of sickness. That's the working time regulations provide for that. There can be issues in the case of employers who perhaps have employees with extended holiday leave period. Because if you've got an employee who's entitled to more than the statutory, the 5.6 or 28 days holiday leave per year, you could theoretically ask them to agree a change in their contracts so that their leave doesn't continue to accrue on furlough. They may take the view, well, I'm not working anyway, I'm going to help my employer out. They've decided to put me on furlough rather than make me redundant or lay me off, and they may agree that. On the other hand, you may have another employee who will say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm entitled to take my holiday. It's in my contract, and they're going to refuse to that. So you're going to have to be sensitive if you did decide to broach the subject of changing contracts.
Okay. And so can I, as the employer, ask the employees or compel them to take holiday during their furlough? And is that a good idea anyway?
You can do, but it may not be a great idea financially for two reasons. First of all, if they're going to take their holiday during the furlough period, they're entitled to be remunerated for that period of absence as if they weren't on furlough. They're entitled to be paid 100% of the normal earnings during that period. The problem arises because the furlough only covers 80% of those earnings. So as an employer, you would effectively be responsible for topping up that extra 20%. And another unresolved issue at the minute is whether taking holiday during a period of furlough would interrupt the furlough leave. So if you had, for example, an employer or an employee rather, who took 2 weeks of furlough leave and then took 2 weeks of holiday and then took another 4 weeks of furlough leave, that period of furlough, that period of holiday, would interrupt the original furlough period. And the risk there would be that the employer wouldn't be able to recoup salary for that first 2 week period. So that again would be another reason for not agreeing leave during the furlough period. But yes, as an employer, it's perfectly your discretion to decide who takes holiday and when.
Okay, well, it sounds like there are some pitfalls for our employer clients to watch out for there. Thank you very much, Graham.
You're welcome.
I'm going to say goodbye from Graham and myself, but don't forget that Graham is here ready to answer any questions that you may have about the new furlough rules and how they work and how they fit in with people's employment contracts. So many thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Goodbye.